All right, ladies and gentlemen, you told me I could not do any more videos about the 2025 Oscars that ended about a month ago, so that's fine. I'm still going to incorporate that Academy Awards somehow, though, for this next series that I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to be counting down winners of the last decade at the Oscars. The series is going to include our lead actress winners of the last 10 years, lead actor, supporting actress, supporting actor, and directors of the last 10 years. I'm going to be starting with this video where I give you the best picture winners of the last 10 years, how I would rank them. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Garage. Gerald here with you, of course. And I can't stop talking about the Academy Awards. However, this time I'm going to be talking about the Academy Awards dating all the way back to the year 2015. Remember those days? Now, this will be a series I will be doing. I will release a couple videos each week until the series is complete. It'll probably take me about a month or two to finish it. And the first one is going to be my top 10 of the best picture winners at the Oscars, starting back in 2015 and going up until the most recent Academy Awards, which of course was 2025, when Anora dominated on Oscars night. When I mention the movie in its respective year, wherever it happens to fall on my list, I will show you a list of what the nominees were that year, and if there was another movie that I would have voted for or that I think should have won the Best Picture Oscar that year, I'm going to let you know that as well. Let's get into it, starting out with my number 10. My number 10 is 2018's Best Picture winner, Green Book. Man, the 2018 Oscars were a weird bunch of nominees. Not only did you have this one, Green Book, as a nominee, but obviously it was the Best Picture winner that year. You also had Best Picture nominations for movies like Vice and Bohemian Rhapsody. Man, I thought I was upset about Emilia Perez this past year. I can't remember how I felt in 2018, but yikes. Look, Green Book is just a little too white savior for me. It's that kind of generic, placating story of the white man comes in and saves the minority, in this case the black man, portrayed by Mahershala Ali, and of course the white man is portrayed by Viggo Mortensen in this film. Both of those leads give great performances. I mean, I'm not going to argue that they're tremendous acting performances in the film, really across the board. The movie itself just didn't hit with me because it just felt so outdated. I mean, you look at movies like The Help, you look even further back to movies like Driving Miss Daisy, which also got a lot of Oscar recognition that year. So I don't like these cookie cutter stories that take us back to the 1960s or even before that, or in some cases in the era of slavery, pre-Civil War even, and make it like, oh, it's rainbows and butterflies because the white man comes in here and he's going to make everything all right. And then the Academy lines up with that and tries to say, it's okay, guys, we got your back. It never works for me, typically. Even if I like the movie on some level, I never think of it as this is the movie that should win Best Picture, because like I said, it's just a tone-deaf, outdated narrative, really. And as promised, in looking at the nominees, the rest of the nominees in the 2018 Academy Awards, my Best Picture winner, there was actually two that were really, really close. I love Yorgos Lanthimos as The Favorite, probably my favorite movie of his, with a just knockout performance from Olivia Colman. But my vote would have gone to A Star is Born, the Bradley Cooper directed remake, essentially, starring himself and Lady Gaga. That's one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years, period. And I definitely think it should have been the Oscar winner that year. My number 9 is going to be Chloe Zhao's Nomadland. This is a kind of an interesting one for me because I really like Nomadland, but it's probably the only movie in this top 10 list, with the exception of maybe Green Book that I just talked about, that I don't think I'm ever going to watch again. I really liked it. I like Zhao's direction. I like the cinematography, the scope of the film. I also love the realism that permeates throughout the movie, because there's actual nomads and actual folks who have lived their lives that way, portraying versions of themselves in the movie, in addition to actors and actresses like Frances McDormand, who also won Best Actress this year. This was also a weird fucking Academy Award season, because this was the year of COVID. In 2020 was when this won Best Picture, and I remember watching that Academy Awards presentation Jesus Christ, this is the worst televised event I think I've ever seen in my entire life. But nonetheless, Chloe Zhao's direction is phenomenal in this movie, and she really does a nice job of creating the scope and the atmosphere surrounding the nomad life. Frances McDormand really dives into that world and makes me believe that she is a part of it. I think it's one of those films that you respect and you're watching and you go, man, this is a fucking great movie. But then you could care less if you ever see it again, and that's kind of where I am. It's my number 9. Now, looking at that Academy Award year 2020, which I already told you was COVID, it was weird. A lot of these you couldn't even see in the theater. I mean, it was crazy. Now, there were 8 nominees that year, and there were a couple really, really good ones, whether you're talking about Minari, The Sound of Metal, which was an inspired nomination that I loved. But my winner that year, and my vote, would go to Promising Young Woman. If you watched my video I put out last week, I'll put a tag on here for you for my favorite female-directed movies. Promising Young Woman was very high on my list in that regard. It was the first movie that I actually saw when I was coming back to the cinema from that like 6 to 8 months off because of the COVID pandemic, and it just blew me away. It was like welcoming me back with just this pop art revenge fantasy, and I was just in love with that movie. It's still one of my favorite movies of the last several years. So that would have been my vote, but my number 9 on this list is the winner, which was Nomadland. My number 8 is the winner from 2015, which is obviously going to make it the oldest one on this list, and that is Spotlight. You know, Spotlight's another movie very similar to Nomadland, actually, where it's like I'm not rushing to rewatch it. It's a very disturbing subject matter in the film that's covered. That's basically the general through line of the narrative, is that these reporters at the Boston Globe and these journalists are uncovering essentially a scandal surrounding the Catholic Church and priests and child molestation, which of course has come to the forefront in recent years and frankly decades, that it's just been a problem, and it's super unfortunate and frankly really, really sad. So it's not a movie that I run to rewatch. However, I will tell you, when it comes to the rewatchability in terms of like viewing it as a film, it comes in the performances. Whether you're talking about Mark Ruffalo, Michael Keaton especially, Stanley Tucci, Rachel McAdams, just all at the top of their game in this movie. This is a cast that works so well together as an ensemble, but because of the thematic elements in the film, it's not one that I'm in love with. I do like it, and I do recognize that it's a great film, and I wasn't even upset, as far as I can remember, at the win in 2015 for this film. So this was another year of 8 nominees back in 2015, and another kind of weird mix of films. You had Spotlight, which obviously won. You also had The Big Short in there. You had a weird nomination for a movie called Brooklyn. You had Room with Brie Larson, who of course ended up winning lead actress for that role. But my pick and my vote for the 2015 Academy Award Best Picture would have gone to Mad Max Fury Road. It was really the standout among these nominees. When you look at them, you could say Mad Max Fury Road and maybe The Revenant were different than all the others. They were definitely standout films for me. And what George Miller has done with his series, including Furiosa, that unfortunately got zero recognition last year, not just from the award circuit, but from people. I mean, nobody went to see it. And it was such a spectacle. It was one of my favorite movies of 2024. And talking about 2015, Mad Max Fury Road, some people would argue, is possibly the best action movie of all time. Kind of like what I said with Spotlight, talk about coming up out of nowhere to win Best Picture. Momentum at the end of the season is huge. My number 7 is going to be the 2021 winner, which is Coda. Now, this is a film that gets a bad rap because I think it was a bit of a underdog 16 seed beating a 1 seed in the final seconds of award season that year. I actually like this movie. I can remember the first time I saw it, I actually cried. My daughter at the time was in college. She was going to film school, so it wasn't music school like the lead character in Coda goes through, but both in the arts and in that communal experience of going to college. So I was kind of experiencing that as a parent at the same time that our lead character is kind of going through what she's going through in Coda. But it ranks here at my number 7, not because I dislike it, just because I don't think it quite lives up to the rewatchability and the overall longevity in terms of impact for me as my top 6 will, as you'll find out when we get to those. Troy Kotsur ended up winning Best Supporting Actor for his role. He plays Ruby's father in Coda. He was the first deaf actor to win an acting prize at the Academy Awards, which is pretty huge. It's a story that you can connect to if you've ever gone through that college experience, and a way to detach yourself and the balancing act between your family life and wanting to do your own thing. And that's a pretty simple story that is really told beautifully in this story in Coda. It's my number 7. There you see the nominees that year for the 2021 Oscars, in which Coda won. And honestly, I'm not like blown away by most of the movies on this list. I mean, I like some of them, but there's also a couple that I didn't really care for. I think my vote would probably go to Drive My Car. The Power of the Dog, I believe, was thought to be the front runner that season. And like I said, Coda kind of came up out of nowhere and gave them a spear tackle to take the award at the end. My vote would have gone to Drive My Car, but Coda is at number 7 on my list. My number 6 is one of the rare instances in which I'm not like in love with a Guillermo del Toro movie, which usually I'm at like 4.5, 5 stars on all of his films. This one was more like a 3.5 to 4 range for me, and it's The Shape of Water at my number 6. Now, unlike a couple of the other years I just mentioned, this year's Academy Award Best Picture nominees was a stacked lineup, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons why The Shape of Water doesn't hit or resonate as much with me personally, just because I was a little perturbed at it winning, frankly, with 3 to 4 of the other films in this list that were some of my personal favorites of that year and of that decade. But I do love Del Toro. I love his vision. I love his stylistic nature of shooting films, and we get that just like we get in all of his other ones here in The Shape of Water. A wonderful performance from Sally Hawkins, who ended up receiving a nomination. Michael Shannon does a villain like no one else can, and he's kind of unsavory in this film as well. So this is essentially borrowing from old school Universal monster flicks like Creature from the Black Lagoon, but with a much more of a romantic element incorporated into it, which was a little freaky. And to be honest with you, you look at a movie like The Substance this past year, and maybe The Shape of Water was kind of the beginning of like, what the hell are they doing? They like that thing? So I would have thought as a horror guy, and honestly, specifically as somebody who loves Creature from the Black Lagoon, that this one would have connected to me a little bit more. I did like it. I just remember it didn't blow me away like Del Toro's other projects leading up to that point had done. In looking at these nominees, like I said, for me personally, movies like Get Out, Lady Bird, and Dunkirk from Christopher Nolan. Now, of course, we know he got his due much later, but I remember at the time going, you're not giving this guy an Oscar for this? But my vote, and the fourth movie that would follow, one of my favorites of all time, especially from this year for sure, is Call Me By Your Name, and that would be my vote. The Luca Guadagnino multiple Oscar-nominated film starring my favorite actor, one of them for sure, Timothée Chalamet, in a role that introduced him to the world for the most part. My number 5 is going to be one of the coolest wins in Oscars history, although it did kind of upset me at the same time. I'll explain. My number 5 is Moonlight from Barry Jenkins. So Moonlight was the 2016 winner, and I was riding high all season with Damien Chazelle's La La Land that year, and I was for sure on a cloud knowing it was going to win Best Picture, probably several other awards as well. And while it did have a great award season, it got upset in the 0 hour like a couple other ones I mentioned here. Now that's the reason why it kind of sits in my craw a little bit. But if I'm just looking at the picture Moonlight, what a phenomenal coming-of-age story. And then outside of the story, Barry Jenkins is one of our great modern storytellers who really tells a visual story that impacts you, gut punches you, and forces you to be in deep with the proceedings. And there's no difference here with Moonlight. This actually might be his best film. Another knockout Mahershala Ali performance here, and it is just a tender, heartbreaking coming-of-age story that is one of the more beautiful to come out in the last 10 years. In looking at the nominees from that year, 2016, I love Hell or High Water, I love Arrival, but my vote, as I said, kind of gave away a second ago, would go to La La Land. I think it was the clear number 1 movie that year. It was a situation where the kind of more auteur, beautiful, important film ended up beating La La Land. And while I'm okay with Moonlight winning, and I think it's one of the more inspired wins of the last decade, I was pulling for La La Land, and that would get my vote. My number 4 is going to be The Behemoth from Christopher Nolan. Now he gets his Oscar. Yeah, I'm, of course, talking about Oppenheimer. Man, what can I say that hasn't been said about this movie? Talk about spectacle, talk about the cinematic achievement from a technical craft standpoint. Nolan was operating on an A+. The dial was at 11 on every single cylinder that went into filmmaking. And then you get the performances. Obviously, Cillian Murphy riding the entire season to his Best Actor win, which was well-deserved. Emily Blunt, RDJ, winning Supporting Actor that year, Robert Downey Jr. Florence Pugh, a great kind of supporting performance from Josh Hartnett here, which arguably maybe started the Josh Hartnett renaissance. But this is a tremendous film that also acts as a bit of a biopic and a historical piece as well, while also being extremely enthralling and entertaining. And it's a movie that is about science and is about nuclear physics. And it's almost 3 hours. And for some reason, we loved it. The general public loved it. They flocked to this. They flocked to Barbie in 2023. And this was the film that carried the flag as Best Picture that year. And I think it was a great win. it falls at my number 4. And there you see the nominees. Now, there were some great films on this list too, but I think my vote would have to go to Past Lives from Celine Song. It was my number 1 film of that year, and it was just such a torturous portrait of a lost love, childhood friendships. And Celine Song has Materialist coming out this year. I saw the trailer recently. It looks a little bit more like a romantic comedy than a movie like Past Lives was. But if she's able to film and portray relationships the way she did in Past Lives, I can't wait to see it. My number 3 is going to be another one of the more inspired wins, along with Moonlight, in this top 10. And that's 2022's win for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Man, I love this movie, and I love the list of nominees this year too, for the most part. They're all very unique and inspired. They're not traditional Academy fare. I mean, most of them. So with Everything Everywhere, we're heightened in that respect. I mean, this is a sci-fi film, first of all, genre. It's a multiverse film, second of all. So you could put it kind of similarly in the realm of like the MCU or comic book adaptations. But Everything Everywhere is just a fucking crazy movie, especially when you think about it in terms of this won the Oscar. I mean, it's really, honestly, kind of weird if you think about it. And I love that. I love the kind of strangeness of the victory and of saying this is the best movie of the year, which came out really early in the year too. A lot of people forget about that. I believe it was released initially like in March or April, and it ended up winning the Oscar, which is a rare thing. Usually you have to come out in the last quarter of the year, or you'll see if it tracks. If you look back at the history, most Best Picture winners come out in the last quarter of their respective years. That was not the case with Everything Everywhere. Michelle Yeoh gives a performance to be reckoned with. She ended up kind of overtaking Cate Blanchett that Oscar season. A lot of people thought Blanchett was going to win again for her work in Tar, which would have been deserved, but Michelle Yeoh and the narrative of kind of her return to Hollywood was too much for the Oscars to resist. Of course, Ke Huy Quan ended up winning Supporting Actor this year, and the Daniels won for direction also. This was a very un-Academy movie to be the Academy film, and I love it for that reason. And in looking at the nominees from that year, I love almost every single one of these films. The only one I was not like blown away by was Triangle of Sadness, although I did like it. But I think the other ones were top tier, and probably all of them would have fallen in my top 25 or so of that respective year. My vote, however, this is the first time we've lined up in this entire decade that I'm covering. I would have also voted for Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think it was the most inspired and unique choice that you had to choose from this year. And on top of that, I love the movie. All right, here we go. This is where I give you guys the invitation to come at me in my comments. That's fine. This is my personal preference. My number 2, my runner-up, is our recent Best Picture winner, Sean Baker's Anora. And I've been talking about this movie on my channel for the last like 3 to 4 months, really ever since I started doing Oscar predictions back in August. So how long is that? It's like 7 months I've been talking about this movie. It is an independent film that was made for $6 million, which is crazy. And it, you know, Sean Baker does that real world type of filmmaking where it's independent cinema that feels like you're a part of the small town or the small section of whatever city he's in, and you live there and you know the people there. They're your neighbors. That's a strip club that you go to. You know Annie. You know, he makes it feel that way. And then to bring in the kind of neutral outsider aspect is where the Russian actors come into play in this movie, led by Yuri Borisov, who of course got a supporting actor nomination this year. What an ensemble cast, led by Mikey Madison, who ended up, for all intensive purposes, upsetting Demi Moore for the lead actress Oscar as she came along with the Anora wave on Oscars night. I did a whole video about that, by the way, and kind of the phenomena around the 25-year-old kind of upsetting at the Academy Awards a veteran actress like Demi Moore. And you could even add Fernanda Torres from I'm Still Here into that mix as well. But she pulled it off. At the end of the day, of the movies that were in the running for Best Picture, Anora was easily my favorite. Now, with that being said, looking at this year's Best Picture nominees, my vote, and if you've been following my channel, you probably know this, even though I know it would stand no chance to win, I would have to just vote for my favorite among the 10, and that would be Dune Part 2. So that would get my vote, which would fucking go nowhere. So my number 2 runner-up is Anora. And my number 1, if you've been keeping score, maybe you know. If not, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It currently sits in my top 20 films ever. And it's definitely my number 1 among the 10 movies that I'm discussing on this list, and that is Bong Joon-ho's phenomenal masterpiece, I said it, Parasite. Not only, first, let me talk about the film. So the film, I can remember seeing one of the trailers for the movie, and I don't remember whose quote it was, but it encapsulates kind of how I feel about the film. It says that Parasite starts out as one thing, and then it mutates into something else. It is like watching a magic trick. That's exactly how I feel about this movie. Now, Bong Joon-ho is pretty world-renowned, and definitely after Parasite, but the movie deals with class, it deals with the wealth disparity that's felt really around the world, because obviously this is not an American story. Some of the best performances of that year, they ended up winning Best Ensemble at the Screen Actors Guild Award, and there was a wave for Parasite at the right time, which, I'm Still Here from Brazil kind of reminded me of that Parasite wave this year, and I was wondering if we were on our way to some kind of shocking tidal wave win for them as well. And of course, they upset and won international, which is amazing. Parasite was like a force, man. It's one of the greatest movies of the 21st century, in my opinion. So I think it was a no-brainer to give this thing the award, even though a lot of people didn't think it was going to happen, because I thought we were probably looking at a 1917 win that particular year, or maybe even Quentin for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But no, it went to Parasite, the international choice that year. And obviously, it would have been my vote as well, as you see the nominees there. Although there are a lot that I love on this list, like Marriage Story, Once Upon a Time, Little Women, 1917, not Joker. Not a big fan of Joker. Also not a big fan of The Irishman. But other than those, it's a great list. But I got to put Parasite as my vote, and also my number one with a bullet. There you go, guys. That's the last 10 Best Picture winners, and that's where I would rank them of my personal preference. What did you guys think? What is your number one among these movies that I discussed on this video today? And you could look for a series of rankings just like this. My next one is going to be for the last 10 lead actress winners. So the last 10 women that won the Best Actress Award of the Oscars, including Mikey Madison. Am I going to put her at number one? What do you guys think? Hit me in the comments. I'll be giving that ranking to you later this week. Thanks for tuning in. Let me know down below what you thought of this video. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you out here next time in the garage.